We're moving on to Chapter 10 tonight, which is a good sign because we're getting to the point in the book where the chapters are getting a little shorter and some of the exercises are more concise. At the same time, some of the exercises are getting a whole lot more powerful, and we're really delving into some of the higher-end HTML5 features, most notably by the use of what we call APIs. APIs, of course, stand for Application Programming Interfaces, meaning that we have software applications that are bundled into our browsers and into the languages that run those browsers. And we have tool sets that we can use to basically leverage those pieces of software to do really pretty sophisticated tasks without a lot of code. So in other words, we don't have to write the code to make it happen. That code pre-exists within the tools that we're using, the browsers most notably, and the protocols. So what we're going to be doing here is we are going to be using technology called WebSockets. And WebSockets is really pretty darn important. Really a very big step forward. And I have a couple of little things here, and I don't mean to do like any extensive lecturing here, just a real brief preview. But I want you to notice the very first line in the chapter that really kind of explains what happens in what we call full duplex communications. Remember I was giving that analogy before about talking on a telephone, and how when we talk on a telephone using what we call circuit switching, that you can talk and listen at the same time, provided your brain can handle that, but you can, right? Arguments are usually good examples of full duplex communications, people talking over each other. But that's exactly what this API allows us to do, is it actually allows us to send and receive at basically the same time over a connection. So that's kind of the long and short of it in a nutshell. The other thing that's important to note is that this actually is a protocol. So a protocol is something that would be equivalent to some of the technologies that we're using to move the data. So for example, when we create web pages and we go to our browser and we type in a web address, ultimately the web address is prefaced with HTTP or HTTPS, Hypertext Transfer Protocol. And all that is, it's a rule set for moving the data. It's the rule set we use to take that HTML and JavaScript and CSS and move it from one place to another over the web. So we have a rule set, an agreed upon way to communicate. And the point here is that the WebSocket technology is a protocol in and of itself. In fact, I'm sure at some point here they probably show it, that WebSockets actually have their own little prefix like HTTP does. So with WS or WSS for secure, and that is a thing. So notice that they have a little reference path down below that if you are using WebSockets, it runs over a different protocol than HTTP. The point of that is we don't want the overhead that comes with HTTP. We just want to move the message back and forth. Really all we need to do to move a message back and forth is know where it's coming from and know where it's going to. That's it. And the rest is just text, right? HTTP's got a whole bunch of other things going on, because you got to move the language across, and then sometimes you have JavaScript, sometimes you have CSS, and it's different. It's a mix of things. This is a little bit more simplistic, but really allows for some powerful things to happen. It is really one of those tools that allows some of the chat applications to really work properly, and in fact that's what we're building here in the exercise today, is we're going to build a server-side component and a client-side component and have the two pieces talk to each other. If we're successful with this, we should also be able to communicate from machine to machine in the classroom. So you don't have to necessarily chat with your own client and server, which is what the exercise has you do. And in fact, so if you guys want to get to that point and you get it working, a fun thing to do is figure out what your friend's IP address is and then send the messages to a different IP address and actually really have client-server chatting going on, which is kind of fun. All right, so from there I'm actually going to jump right down to the exercise and get started, now that you have a little bit of preview. we are going to be using the node.js technology again. All right. And the reason for that is that's our server-side component here. So the key for you to understand is that you can't do this kind of thing without a server. Okay. All right. Have you guys installed Node.js? Yes, we have. All right. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to do some of the work here. Now, I am going to just do a little preface again with all this like file management they want us to do, because they want you to do all this file management from the command prompt, which I think is a good exercise. I think you guys should learn command prompt, but I recommend that this is not where you store your files. Okay, so really what I would prefer that you do, just for the sake of brevity and accuracy, is to jump to where you store your stuff. So my stuff's in my Google Drive. I'm going to my Web 2 class, my 2018 Spring folder, and I'm looking at the folder names they want us to create, and that is chat service. So inside here, I'm just going to create a new folder and call it chat, and I forget if it's, okay, chat underscore service, and that has to be accurate, of course. All right, so now that I've done that, it's not as fancy as doing it from the command prompt. We can now bring up the command prompt and navigate to that folder, but I would click yourself into that folder first, come up to your address bar, Control-C to copy that address. Or right-click copy. Maybe that's a little clearer. And then I want you to open up a command prompt. So go to your Start menu, type CMD. Yes, you can use the Node.js one if you want. Doesn't matter. Same difference. Type CD space, and then either right-click paste, or just, if you're in Windows 10, you can just Control-V to paste. Press Enter. I have been discovering with Windows 10 that when you do this, it doesn't switch drives for you, so I have to actually type G:, because I'm using my Google Drive, and it, for whatever reason, created a G drive. Thank you, Google, to switch to that. You might not have to do that if you're working on your own C drive. So now I'm in the folder and ready to move on to the subsequent steps. So I'm going to start moving some stuff out of the way here. All right. The next command that we're going to be typing is back to the Node Package Manager to create the package JSON file. The same process we used last time. We're just doing it for a new project now. So we're going to type npm init. You do have to be in the right folder for this to work, though, folks. So you got to be in this folder. All right. Excuse me. Let's see if I can maybe split screen this a little bit, a la what I used to do in the Ruby on Rails class. That's not too bad. They do want us to call this chat service with an underscore. So let's do that. This is suggesting version 1.0. Sure, that sounds great. I press enter. If I was really working on versions of the project and it was version 1.0.1.b or whatever, I guess. But I'm going to put in a description. This is my homework. Our entry point. Notice that the default is index.js, but the book is asking us to do app.js. So that's what I'm doing. Test command. Do you guys have a test command? You do? What?
Well, I have to sit.
Because I'm just going to press enter. Am I attaching my Git repository? I don't know. Do I have some keywords? Sure, if you want. What should I put in? Whatever. Okay. That's my keyword. Author. Just me. Or you. Whatever. We're going to go with the default license. They're asking us to review. What should I say? Yes? right? That created a file. So if I now go back to my folder and take a look, there's my package.json file. It does want us to make some tweaks. Okay, we're going to add 2 packages to this project and add a little stipulation. Now, normally I would do this in Visual Studio, but remember, folks, these are just text files. You can use any text editor. It doesn't matter. Absolutely doesn't matter. So I'm bringing up my Notepad++, a little bit of a zoom. And then I'm noticing here that they want us to add private true and then a couple of dependencies. So I'm going to come in here and right after the license add a comma, private, colon true, and then we're going to add dependencies, a colon, curly bracket. In between the curlies, we're going to type in express, and they put in a version number. Sure, why not? 3.0, that's in quotes though, right? And they also want us to use socket.io, and they also have a version number for this. When you've made your edits, go ahead and do a Control-S to save. And really, at this point, you should be able to just close this. All right, back to the command prompt. And the next command they want us to install, as you can see on the left side here, is Mpm Install. Just to do a refresh of what this does, is this will look at the dependencies that we added and look for those packages and then try to install them. So it's adding components to our project. Usually they're JavaScript libraries because this is a JavaScript technology. So let's let it do its work. And of course we got errors. Oh no, let's pack it up and go home. It's still going too, so it's gonna give us a whole bunch of stuff. All right, so I let it finish what it was doing, and I'm gonna make this taller so I can look at all my error messages at once if possible, and try to figure out what the heck it's telling me. And it's okay to actually resize the command prompt window. You don't have to stick with the way it is. And I'm doing that on purpose because I want to read the messages in a way that is readable to me. All right, so let's see. It says error, tar unpack. Untar error. What's tar? Oh, it's that black stuff on the road? Right. No. Alex, I know you know what it is.
Yeah, basically a file format for all files.
Yeah. So it's just a different way to zip files.
Yeah.
Right? And I forget what the acronym stands for. I think it's like some sort of archive or something like that. Yeah, so whenever you see a tar, and then when you're using a Linux or a Unix file system, folks, compressed files in those formats are often in tar.gz format, which stands for a tar archive in gzip format. They're basically Unix or Linux zip files. So if you ever see those, that's what those are. On a PC, typically you cannot open those. On a Linux or a Mac or a Unix machine, you can, because that's the format it's designed for. But it's saying here that it's, okay, untar error, okay, yeah, that's not good, this isn't good. I can't even read what this says right here. It says optional depth fill continuing. But what it's doing, just so you understand here, and this is pretty typical for a lot of systems like this is very, very Unix-like, what we're seeing right now, is you go to install something on a Unix machine, and anything you install will have dependencies. And it's like, sure, I can install my cool program, however, I require these other cool programs to run as well. right? And apparently they're not present or they're the wrong version numbers. So now the question becomes, what do I do to fix it? Did anything even work?
I ran mine before and changed the JSON file, and it worked.
And what did you change in your JSON file? I'm curious.
Just the stuff that you just changed. Now, so I ran it first, and installed it fine, and then changed, added the things to the JSON.
Ah, interesting. So Jason said that first he did the npm install,
Yeah.
and then added the dependencies to his JSON file. And then it worked? All the way through the exercise?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Now, why would that be? I'm not asking you to actually answer that. All you know is it worked, right? Because you probably looked it up on Stack Overflow or something, right? All right. So I also want you to notice, and part of what I'm doing here, it isn't about it working or not working as much as it is about, like, you're confronted with something you've never seen before. Oh my God, what do I do, right? Because that's what like goes through your head, or it should kind of go through your head as a normal human being, right? Because this stuff, I mean, it's not like you're working in Windows and you got a little pop-up box that says a whole bunch of stuff you usually ignore and just click OK, right? You got to start reading, folks. The stuff that pops up on the screen is there for a reason, and it's not necessarily always the answer or necessarily even the problem, but it's indicating that something is going wrong, and it's up to you to try to figure out what the heck it means and how you're going to circumvent it. So if you were... That's a great question. Why aren't they coming up? Right, because it really is, it is trying to hit express. See right here? And you guys notice that here it actually specifies a version number? So one of my first inclinations would be to fix this problem, real frankly, is, well, now I know the version number, I'm just going to type that in. Should we try that? Yeah, I mean, why not? What are we going to, I mean, the worst thing that's going to happen is we redo it. So that's not a big deal. So it says 06, so hey, what the heck, let's do it, right? Well, since we're on that mindset, is there a socket IO in here somewhere? Do we even get that far? I don't see a socket IO. All right, whatever. Go back, save, right? Make sure it's saved. Let's try that again. Up arrow, npm install. Is it going to work or not? Brian?
It had us put the .x, doesn't that mean put any
Yeah, it should.
after it?
Yeah, right. So you're on to the fact that this probably isn't going to help me one bit. Okay.
You have to define almost each package individually.
Yes, and that is one approach, is to actually manually install each package. And I've seen students do that, and that's one approach. But I'm really curious to try Jason's approach, because that to me sounds like a whole lot easier than individually installing packages.
Yeah.
Jason, how did you figure that out?
I just ran it before I realized I was supposed to change that file, so it was completely the same.
Okay, so this was discovered by accident. So it wasn't like, how do I... Okay. I'm always curious. You know what, Jason? I'm willing to try that approach because I think that sounds entertaining. So you basically did the install without this stuff here, right? And really, you got to be really careful because that comma is part of it. All right. So here's what I'm doing. I'm going to cut that, and just to be sure I don't lose it, I'm just going to paste it into an empty document, and then I'm going to save this one, and let's give it another shot. Now, this should work. You know why? Because there's nothing to install.
Yeah.
Isn't that fascinating? But it does give me, and what this yellow stuff says is warn. And just like in Visual Studio, if it's a warning, it doesn't mean it's not going to work. That's like your parents saying, I'm warning you, if you do this, right? That doesn't mean you can't do it. That just means, it's probably not a good idea. But it's saying that I have no repository and no README data. Yeah, that's true. Okay, so I'm not worried about that. But now you said you just continue with everything and everything just worked.
Yeah.
Boy, I am very uncomfortable with that, I'm going to tell you right now. So I'm having problems with this unpack with the npm install. So what I'm resolving to do is test the theory here after fuddling with it like off of the recording for a while, that really the problem might be my Google Drive partially and the way the files write to it and what programs have permission to write to it, because you got to think about what's happening. And now I'm expounding a theory that might not even be correct, okay? My thinking is that node.js does not have the access rights to write to my G drive natively without my permission when it comes to installing packages. I could be completely wrong, but I'm now going to work on my desktop, not my preferred place to work, just to test that theory. So I am going to create a directory, and actually now I'm going back up to the C drive, or step number 3 really. But I'm going to make the directory for chat service. I'm going to do that manually. I'm going to change into that directory. And then I'm going to do a listing. All right, so we're there. It is working. Now we're going to try npm init. Let that run. You'll see that it retained all my settings from before. Some of them. We all agreed that that's roughly correct. Then we were supposed to do an edit. So I'm trying to follow the book steps still. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this file, which already has the settings in it. I'm going to put an X in here, like the book says to do. And then I'm going to save that in a different location. So desktop, chat service. And yes, I'm overwriting that file. I understand that I'm doing that. Now, the one thing that does catch my eye here, does this have to be in quotes? No. Because that's anomalous, right? It's not normal. All right, so let's assume that that's all okay. Let me type dir just to see that it's okay, it is there. And now the command is npm install, correct? Please work. That looks okay. Okay. So I'm going to guess that my theory was correct. So my theory is, or was, that the Node package manager didn't have the ability to install stuff on my Google Drive because it didn't recognize, maybe it has like a user account that it uses, some construct that wasn't working right. Okay, so that could be something that might happen to you guys too. So at this point, this looks okay. It does show me that one of these things is deprecated, and then you notice that it does also throw a message here. It says, you know, about, and this is one of our tools, right? Socket.io. So do we see this as a problem? I don't think so, but we'll see. Shows that all this other stuff did get installed. Socket.io is installed with these dependency, and Express is installed with these dependency. So even though we listed 2 dependencies, they have their own dependencies, right? It's kind of like if you take a class, you know, there's a prereq, and then there might be a prereq for that, and a prereq for that, and a prereq for that. So that you don't go to Web 2 in your first semester. That's kind of the example. And now you can see why, right? Because if I threw this stuff at you in your first semester, you'd run screaming for the hills probably. All right, so now I'm going to call this step number 6 done on page 426. So now we're going to jump over to Visual Studio, folks, and now I'm going to be working in this folder that's on my desktop, which is a little bit unusual, but that's where we're at. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Visual Studio, which still has my previous work from the previous chapter in it, so I'm going to close that solution. And then we're going to choose Open Website, and we are going to navigate to that folder on the desktop. So hopefully you guys know how to do that on your own machines. And now we have our files there. All right, so inside this folder, we are just going to create an app.js file. Now, they're not telling us to put it inside of a separate folder. They just want it dumped right in here. Okay, it's kind of like a brute force kind of thing. It's not really so brute force, but they're just putting it in what we typically would think of as an atypical location, just because we're usually used to putting these things into folders every time. But we're following the instructions. So we're creating an app.js file, and then there's a little snippet of JavaScript variables they want us to add here, which is like this. Now, I think this is really kind of an interesting layout that they're using here, because you notice that really what they're doing is they're separating everything with commas, but instead of putting the commas at the end of the line, they're putting them at the beginning of the line. It's kind of weird, right? That's not where I would normally put them, but just know that, basically. Now, what basically we're doing here is we're setting up a series of variables, not one variable, but a series of them. And notice that we have a couple of requires in there. Notice that we are calling upon Express. That's one of the modules that we added. And then we're also calling upon socket.io to basically listen to what we're going to be doing. All right, next thing is we are going to come up here to the root of the project again, and this time we're going to add a new folder. And they want us to call this folder public lowercase p, so we're doing it. Back to the app.js file. Now we're going to add a pathway to that public folder, like so. Moving on to page 427. We're setting up now another pathway, and this one is going to point to our index file. Of course, we don't have that yet. We are going to be obviously creating that, but that's just what we're doing. And then step number 12. We're adding some redirect code here to take people to the default HTML page, also something we don't have yet. Another statement we're adding in step number 13. And I know the book tells you what we're doing here. What am I creating here? I'm setting up a variable with an empty set of curly brackets. Okay, I like where you're thinking. Is that right? Is she right? Yeah, that's right. We're just creating an empty object of some sort. Could be any block of code. And you can do that with JavaScript. That's what's really cool about it. All right. Next thing, something we probably never would code from scratch unless you're like a total geek that knows this technology inside and out. But it's basically a way to connect to the sockets that are being used. In other words, the ports that are being used to move the data back and forth. So these are a series of commands, and according to what the book says here, it subscribes to the socket events so that you have that communication going back and forth. Another thing that we're going to do here is we are going to add a little bit of code at the bottom like we did in the previous application to listen on a specific port. We're going to use the same port as before. And then in step number 15 on page 428, you should have a snapshot of what your whole application should look like so far. So it should look kind of like this. And I'm doing a comparison right now with the book to make sure that it matches up. This looks good, looks good. Well, I got a couple things in the wrong spots maybe. So I see app use, app get, usernames. I don't, this is kind of curious, I don't see this one in the example. Do you guys see this one in the example? Yeah, that's in step number 12, but when I look at step number 15, I don't see that included. Isn't that curious? Now, the book told me to do it, so I'm leaving it, because I like the rationale for it, but I think it's fascinating. All right, so at this point, they do want us to save our work and then test it. So this time, in order to test this, we have to make sure we're in that folder, which I am here. And instead of typing node index, I'm going to type node what? Yeah, I got to call that particular file. So that's what I'm doing. All right. Now, according to this, if we see this, it's working. That's not really comforting right now. But it is telling us that the socket IO started, and that was based on the code that we pasted in. All right, I'm going to go ahead and do a Control-C to stop that for now. And that actually completes exercise 1, folks. All right, we're moving on to exercise number 2 now. We're at the bottom of page 429. And step 1 wants us to open up the website, which we already have in Visual Studio, and go to the public folder. So let's go to the public folder. That's right here. And then we are going to create a few files. So the first thing we're going to create is index.html. And I am noticing here, and this is kind of interesting, that the book's got index.html with a capital I. You guys picking up on that? But our redirect script says lowercase. So what should I do? Oh, I didn't want to create a new folder. Not good. Okay, delete. All right. They want us to create a new HTML page. Right at the top. C# though, it's backend language. Called index. I'm going with lowercase because that's what's in my JavaScript code. All right. I see nods in the room. Thank you for humoring me. Once again, we're going to add a style sheet. This is default.css. They're all going in the public folder. They want us to create a new folder called scripts. Oh, but they want that folder inside the public folder. You guys catching that? So new folder inside public. And this one's called scripts. So then inside the scripts folder, we want to create a JavaScript file called default.js. Then we also want to add the jQuery library. And now here they're giving us a little bit of a different directive, because normally we do this off of the root of our project, but right now what they want us to do is actually do it off of the scripts folder. So we want to right click No, I'm sorry. I apologize. They want us to go off the public folder, and from there add. Yes, I understand. Thank you. Okay, so I got to save everything first and save a solution file. And remember, I don't want it there. Wait, we are on the desktop, right? Let's save it right in the root here. So now let's go ahead and do that. So I think it's curious that you can't do that unless you're saved, which tells you something about how the technology works. Let's go ahead and install. And then once that is done, you can close that window. Oh, but look where I put it. Did yours do the same?
In a PDF package, how you could open up the bucket in the bottom type field.
It just basically put those scripts wherever it wanted to. So we'll see if that's going to become an issue. Really, it shouldn't be, because we can drag the link into wherever we're working and it should be okay. But I think it's curious that's what they thought would be the thing. Now, in Solution Explorer, they're now telling us to go into the node modules, and this is a little bit of a different step here. They want us to find socket.io, and they want us to find node modules within that, and then within there they want the socket.io client. You guys like following me here? Going too fast? Let me expand the Solution Explorer so you can see where I'm at. So node modules, socket.io, node modules, socket.io client, and then the distribution folder, which is this one. All right, so you see all that? All right, so I see a couple of JavaScript files in here, but what the heck is an SWF file? Single white female? No, it's not a single white female. Yeah, it's a Swift file is what they call them, and it's a shockwave flash file. So apparently there's, like, built into this tool is a Flash interface too that you can use on a project. So if you want to run Flash on a website, you can probably pull those in. All right. All right, so now they're saying go in here and select the 4 files that are in here and copy them, right? No, actually, that's not what they're saying. I'm trying to do it a different way, so I'm hotwiring this. It says in the file type drop-down list, select all files and select the 4 files that are now showing in the folder. What step? Oh, I see. It says add existing item. Okay. Sorry about that, folks. Don't do what I do. Do what I say. No, don't do what I say. Do what the book says. All right. So here we are. We are going to right-click the scripts folder. So I'm assuming it's this one at this point, or is it this one? You see my conundrum here? My gut feeling is I should put them in this folder because we're doing a client thing, right? Okay, so that's where I'm going to put them. So I'm going to right-click, add new item, and actually that's not what I want. I apologize again. Add existing item, and that's where we come in here and navigate all these folders. Node modules. Right? And then we want to make sure that we're looking at all files. So you have to do the star.star thing down here. And don't worry, I will pause and backtrack if I need to, if I'm going too fast. But then we want to select all those and add them. So right now I'm going to press pause. All right, so if you succeeded with that, I'm now looking at step 10 on page 431, and I'm looking to see that in the index.html file that's inside the public folder, they want you to drag a bunch of stuff in so that you have the links to all these files. And what I'm noticing is that they have the jQuery basically with the other scripts. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to grab this copy of the jQuery file, and I'm just going to paste it into the scripts folder. And then I'm going to come to the index file here, and I'm going to start dragging in the references, and I'm going to do them one at a time. First with the CSS file, then I'm going to drag in the jQuery. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. This is what I want to do. From there, I'm going to drag in the socket.io.js, and then the default.js in that order. And it's important that you do it in this order because jQuery is required, and you don't want socket.io to be using jQuery without it being present, and you don't want default.js to use it without being present. So this is the order that you want to put stuff in. All right, so now on step number 11, page 431, it wants us to put some stuff actually into the HTML section. So they want us to add 2 divs, and I'm just going to copy and paste these in. And basically what we're doing is we're setting up containers here to kind of receive content as we go. A little bit of text, but basically setting up containers. Then we're also going to open up the CSS file here, folks, and add some CSS. So I'm going to do this in pieces because it spans pages. Here's the first piece. Oh, I guess it doesn't span pages. I apologize. Make sure you do a save on each one of the files that has changes in it. Other thing we want to do in the default JS file, which is this one, we're going to want to add a reference path. And it needs to be a reference path. And actually, you can do it this way. You don't have to type it in that way. You can drag and drop that too. Control S to save. And then steps 14, 15, and 16 is where we're going to trigger our document ready function and add the socket connections. We're going to declare the ports and what happens with all of the actions. So first we start with a variable. And then with the socket communications. And when you get it all done, it should look something like this. If you're getting any underlines, if you save in the interim, it might throw some errors because it's calling on functions that we haven't created yet. And then on steps number 18 and 19, we're adding the function that's actually going to process the message for us. Steps 20 and 21, we're adding the next function. This one is designed to, as it's named, update the list of users that are connected. We also need a method that is going to actually send the message. Notice the socket command there. And step number 23 is the function that's going to react to the key press of enter. And then what they do in step number 24 for us over pages 433 and 434 is they show the completed code so that you can make sure that you got everything in there and that it all is working okay. So let's go ahead and save that. All right. Next step, and I think about as far as we're going to get tonight, is to come back to your prompt and type node space app.js to get the server running, and it is listening. Of course, we are going to bring up our browser, which of course is on the other screen. Well, let's bring it back over. And here we're going to type our localhost 8080. And is this exciting stuff, folks? It is. And really all we've done so far is we've created the client side of this. But for as simplistic as it is, believe it or not, it works. Now, step number 29 says open another browser window. So you want to open the same browser, that's fine. You want to open up a different one, that's fine. So I'm just going to open up a different one, and I'm just going to put them kind of side by side here. I'm going to go to the same browser, and what's my name? This one's not me. You guys seeing what's happening now? So for as primitive as this is, folks, we do have two-way communications happening between two browser windows. They're both attaching to the same server, which is why it works. Now here's the interesting thing. If you set up the firewall correctly on your computer and you tweak the code correctly inside your application, so instead of it going through localhost 8080, it goes to whatever your IP address is, :8080, you can talk between machines, even across the internet or across the room. For as primitive as this is, we have a functioning chat client. Like wow, right? Okay, that's it, folks. That covers it, basically. So we actually did complete 2 chapters tonight, which makes me happy. We only went 7 minutes over tonight. And that wraps this video.